Hey, let's go. All right, welcome everyone. I hope you're sitting in someplace warm and you have something warm to drink. I've got my nice cup of chai tea here today. And this is the How to Tell Stories That Sell Masterclass. So if that's what you were expecting, you're in the right place. And there's a number of people who registered for this class who have told me that they will be coming during the replay. They won't actually be here live. So I want to be respectful of all of the folks who will actually be joining us live, or sorry, joining us in the replay, as well as you guys who are here right in the moment. And so I'm going to dive right in, get started without too much preamble. But if you're here, I can see any comments that you make in the chat. So anytime as I'm going through what we're talking about today, if you have a question, if you have a comment, you can stick it in the chat and I will see it. And I'll be taking breaks so that we can do a little bit of Q&A as we go forward. Now this class is meant to last probably about no more than an hour. And I'm going to keep it to that time. So I'm respectful of your time. And here's what we're going to cover. I've got all my notes here on my handy iPhone. So this class is going to be delivered in 4 parts. The first part is basically the elements that make for a great story, and even the part about why you should be using storytelling in your business and particularly in your marketing. That's part number 1. And then I'm going to share a very simple formula that you can use to take any anecdote, any story that you have, like an idea that you have, and use this formula to turn it into a kind of way, a kind of story, a way of communicating that will, in fact, not only get the message across, but will move people, will inspire them to take whatever action you'd like them to take, including buy from you. And this is the selling part. So this is a formula that you can use to structure your story in a way that it delivers a message that is sales-worthy, which is so often missed in the way marketing and communication is done. Then I'm going to give you a couple of examples of stories that are delivered in this way, just really simple. Here's an example. Here's a kind of story. And so you can see how it works really clearly. And then lastly, we're going to spend a little bit of time on helping you figure out how to find your stories, how you can go about collecting your stories. And I will give you a practice to do so that you can go out there from today forward and start collecting stories, starting to apply this formula, and starting to use storytelling so that you're moving people in your marketing messages and you're actually bringing in more clients, more sales, and all that good stuff for your business. So if that sounds good, give me a thumbs up in the comments. I'll just glance over here. And yeah, cool. So we are going to get started, and I'm just sort of looking, I've got my computer right down here on a counter. And it happens to be this gray, rainy day at the end of February, which is normal for February, right? So here's part 1. What makes for a great story? What you want to have in your story when you are creating any kind of messaging is you want to put together some way of saying things to people that goes beyond simply sharing information. And the whole reason that you would want to use a story instead of just tell people stuff or show them how to do something or give them a long list of data points is that in the way that people receive information, you can give them all the information in the world, but this studies show this, that the very next day they won't remember hardly any of the stuff that you said. They really won't. Like, you can be really good, you can be really clear, you can be really articulate, you can be really animated, but you'll say a bunch of stuff, and shortly afterwards, the next day, 2 days later, most of that stuff that you said will be gone. But if you tell a story, and you tell a story in the right way, this is what people will remember. And the reason that they'll remember it is because a good story has an emotional component. What happens when we hear a story is that we feel something. We see something that's happening in the story to some character who is part of the story, whether they're a real character or a fictional character, it doesn't matter. And that character goes through some kind of narrative arc where they go up a hill and then they go down a hill, and then they go up a hill and then they go down a hill. And as they're doing that, the character goes through an emotional upheaval. They go through emotional changes. And as they're doing that, we feel the same emotion as the character in the story. And it sounds like, yeah, but why would I do this in my business? I mean, business people, my clients aren't interested in hearing fairy tales. And that may be true. However, you can still use story in your messaging in a way that when people hear the story, they will connect with the emotional content in the story. They will literally feel the same feelings. And people don't remember what you say, but they will remember how you make them feel. All right? They don't remember what you say, but they remember how you make them feel. This is what's so critical. So this is all by way of saying, this is why you want to be using stories in your messaging, particularly in your marketing messages. So storytelling, it's critical. It's something that you all want to practice and get good at. And the better you get at it, the more successful you will be in your enterprise. The truth is that when you are doing good storytelling and you're thinking in the lines of, I really want to sell my product, I really want to sell my services, you don't actually have to make the sale. You don't actually have to, push people, make those offers, all that kind of stuff in this kind of messaging. What happens is that people will feel something. You'll be making them feel something. Through that feeling, through that emotional experience, they will connect with you. They will relate to you. And they'll be thinking, oh, this person who I'm connecting with right now, this is the person who I want to work with for this thing that we're all talking about, for the thing that you do, for the topics and the subjects that you're covering in your messaging and in your stories. So if I'm telling stories and I'm connecting people, and I'm also talking all around how to market yourself and make videos in your marketing, and I'm connecting with my audience while I'm doing that through good storytelling. This, when it comes time for me to say, hey, look, my doors are open on my new course that I'm offering, people will have already felt like, yeah, here's a person who I'd like to work with. This is someone who I can believe in. This is someone who I can trust. This is someone who I know understands me and my situation. And storytelling will bring people to that threshold. And this is one of the most powerful things, one of the most powerful ways that you can be communicating your message in a way that draws people in and brings them to the place of, I'm ready. I'm ready to make the purchase. I'm ready to commit. I'm ready to whatever that is that they need to do in order to start working with you. So there's the preamble on why do we do this. The other parts of a story that you really want to pay attention to when you're looking at, okay, what do we do here with storytelling? The biggest, most critical thing is that all good stories have conflict or some form of challenge, and they have some form of transformational change. Something happens. Something happens in the story that brings people to a new place. So you have a character and they're meeting a challenge, and then something happens, and then they're being brought to this new place. So we all know that in the structure of creating a story, you have a beginning and a middle and an end. And in that structure, the beginning, the middle, and the end, that's sort of the most simplistic way to look at it. And what that doesn't really help you do is sort of go, okay, well, what's the difference? Like, what's the difference between the beginning and the middle? How do I know when I've left the beginning and I've gotten to the middle? And how do I know when I've left the middle and I've gotten to the end? Like, there's no guideposts or anything for that kind of structure. So recently, I learned of a new way of thinking about those three parts. And the new way is to think about it in the form of there's a normal. And so when you start your story, you want to explain the way the world is at the beginning of the story. Here's the situation. Here's the character, and you identify them, and you identify the world around them as it is in that normal world. And then the second part of the story is an explosion. Something big happens. And this is where the transformation, the change, the challenge, the conflict, boom, it all happens. So explosion. And then the last part of the story is the new normal. You know, what's new now? Like, change has happened, and what does the new normal look like? What is all of that? What's the outcome of this change? And so that's it. And with those three parts, you can structure any tale. Because if you're just, sharing just something that happened, like yesterday I went to the store and I bought some salad greens. And then I came home and I made a smoothie. And after I had the smoothie, I sat down and I felt like I had a little more energy. Well, that doesn't make for much of a story. I mean, that's just a set of events. And so you want to put that together into something a little more meaningful around, I could dress that up around saying, well, here's me last week, and I was feeling like my energy was suffering, and that I spent all my time boosting my energy with black tea, like I do right now. So I'm boosting my energy with black tea, but what it really does is it kind of keeps draining my energy. And the more I boost it with caffeine, the more drained I feel. The more I boost, the more I drain. The more I boost, I drain. Until finally, I'm feeling really drained. But then I heard about smoothies. I heard that in the middle of the day, if you drink a green smoothie, it can totally change how you feel in that dead period in the middle of the afternoon. So off I went to the grocery store and I went looking for, some greens. And I bought the greens and I came running home and I threw them in my blender and I made up this beautiful, delicious smoothie. And it wasn't just greens. I put in some mango and some raspberries and some other stuff to make it taste really good. And then I drank it down and it did taste really good. And then the amazing thing is that 3 o'clock rolled around and I just pushed right through that 3 o'clock period without feeling like my brain had gone dead. So that's a very simple, really simple thing using those 3 steps. There was the old normal of me feeling energy drained. There was the explosion of learning about green smoothies and going and actually blending a green smoothie together. And then the change is that in the afternoon, the new normal is that I'm able to go through this period where I'm usually feeling really low energy and I'm feeling good. And even that isn't terrifically amazing story, but it definitely helps me make it into more of a story. So that's part 1. And what I want to do right now is I want to share with you the formula that you can put together for taking any story and turning it into a story that sells. Taking any story that you have and turning into a formula that will actually move people and motivate them to take action and to, do whatever it is that you're going to want them to do at the end of your story. So I'm just gazing at the comments here. I don't see any comments. So if you've got any questions or comments on any part of this as I'm going along, anything you want to say, if you have an insight, use the light bulb emoji and write it in the comments. That guides me in terms of what I'm saying. So here we go. Here's the formula. So this formula, as you're thinking about a story, first thing you want to do is you want to think about the end of the story. And remember, I was telling you about emotions and how you want people to feel. And this is where you want to start when you're designing your story. So you want to think about the end, and it basically answers the question, how do you want people to feel at the end of your story? Do you want them to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss out if I don't get on the bandwagon? That's one kind of feeling. Or do you want to have them feeling like, oh my gosh, this was so amazing, I'm super excited? Or anything in between, like just decide, where do I want to take people on an emotional level? And pick that emotion and say, okay, here's what I want. You could be telling a story that's amusing, and you say, okay, well, I want to make people smile. I want to have people hear this story and put a smile on their face. Whatever that is, pick the emotion. And then after you have picked an emotion, then you pick the story. And in the next part, I'm going to show you a method of collecting stories so that basically you can look at your story list and say, oh, here's a story that would be a good match for this emotion. So you pick the emotion, and then you pick your story, and then basically you tell the story. You tell the story with the normal, the explosion, and the new normal. That's the basic structure of the story part. And then once you've told that story, you then, part 3 is that you then say, okay, and this is the moral. Here's the lesson that I learned from this story. Here's the lesson that I get. Here's my takeaway. And after explaining what that moral is, then you connect it to your business and basically tell the business moral. Because usually a story will have this thing that's very universal about it. And then after that, you want to connect the dots between that universal lesson and then how people can apply it with the work that you do and your particular methodology. And this is really key, because after people hear the story, they've got this emotional component. They're feeling the same emotion that you wanted them to feel. And now you're saying, well, here's the takeaway. Here's the big lesson that you can take away from this story. And then you want to bring it to your work. You want to bring it to your method. Because when people are thinking like, yeah, this is great, now they've learned this lesson, I want more of this, and they learn that your method is where they can get more, then you become very attractive. And this is where a big part of the selling happens, because they're now going, oh my gosh, I want this. And now one of the only places, or maybe the only place that I can get it, is with you, because you've just connected the dots between this big universal thing and your way of working in the world and your way of delivering a particular solution or solving a particular problem. And then, of course, the last step is you then tell them what to do. You tell them what to do, which is your call to action. And that can be anything that you want. It could be, sign up for my masterclass. It could be join me on my Facebook page. It could be, let's get on a call and we can go deeper and talk about how we can go even further in solving this problem for you. All of those kinds of things are very reasonable calls to action. So I'm just going to quickly review all of that. I've got these cool little banners here. So number 1, you want to pick your emotion, and This is where, ask the question, how do you want your audience to feel at the end of your story? And then number 2 is you tell your story. You pick that story that matches the emotion, and then you tell it using the simple formula of normal, explosion, something happens, some change happens, and then you have new normal. So here's the world at the beginning of the story. Some big challenge, conflict, transformational change occurs, and then there's a new normal. That's the structure. After you've told your story, you want to tell the moral of the story. Here's my takeaway. Here's what I learned. Here's what I think is the most important element here for us to remember. Because at the end of your story, this is when people are leaning in. They're going, oh my gosh, this was cool. This was interesting to me. And you can hit them with, here's the most, like if you really want to know why I told this story, what's the most important part? Say this one thing. And you can frame it that way. And this is the part that people will remember. And then, of course, you want to connect it to your own work by telling the business moral. Connect the dots between the story, this universal lesson, and your work and the thing that you do. And then after that, give them a call to action. Tell them what to do. That's it. Those are the steps. All right. So I'm going to come back over here and take a little drink of water. So I'm going to give you an example of a story that uses this formula. And this is an example of the kind of thing that you can derive from your own experience. And your stories don't have to be your own story. You can tell stories that are your client's stories. I got to keep reminding myself to stay hydrated. It really helps my voice. So you can tell client stories. You can tell stories from a movie. You can tell stories from a book you read. You can tell stories about friends. You can tell stories about the past. You can tell stories from history. You can tell stories about famous celebrities or famous people, whoever, it almost doesn't matter. But often I find the very best stories come from our own experiences. And the exercise that I'm going to give you next is going to be one that you can use to start gleaning story ideas from your life and from all the things that are around you. And it's a very easy thing to do, super simple. So here is a sample story. And this is something from my own experience. This is something that actually happened to me. So once upon a time, in the time before the pandemic, there were people who used to travel on airplanes. And there were people who used to gather together at large conferences. And I was one of those people. I used to go to like 3 and 4 day conferences fairly often, several times a year. And on one of those occasions, I was going to an event that was happening down in North Carolina. And I live in Boston. So I was flying from Boston to North Carolina. I was traveling on JetBlue. And when you get on a plane, you get to pick your seat ahead of time. You get to reserve your seat. And so I had done this, and I always pick the aisle seat. And when I go to a conference like this, I'm always in this mindset of, oh, great, I'm going to a big event. I'm going to meet a whole new bunch of people. Like I'm going to be able to network and meet and get with other, smart, creative folks all around this topic that I'm really interested in. We're all going to get to exchange ideas. I'm going to learn a whole bunch of new stuff, and I'm going to meet a whole bunch of new people. And I'm always wondering, who in this crowd is going to become my next new best friend? This is the thing that I'm anticipating. What really interesting person am I going to meet? And I get excited. It always feels really good when I'm on my way to an event like this. So I'm walking down the aisle, and I'm already in that travel mode. I'm already in that sort of excited, oh my gosh, I could meet anybody. This could be great. I'm wondering if maybe there's somebody on the plane who's going to the same event that I'm going to. Like, this plane is going to Charlottesville, North Carolina, which is where the event is. Surely somebody on the plane is going to the same thing. So maybe they'll be sitting next to me. So by the time I get to my seat, this is what I'm thinking. And however, when I sit down, next to me on the plane in the window seat is this young woman, and she's sitting there and she's got, her iPad out and she's got her earbuds in and she's just focused on her iPad. And she doesn't look up. She doesn't acknowledge me. She doesn't say hello. And for the whole flight, she basically ignores me. So here I was, like, anticipating maybe something's going to happen, but I get next to this person who just is completely in another zone, and it's kind of normal. Like, this is what has been the normal world that we live in. Like, we ignore each other when we're on the plane. And so, I didn't think too much of it because, okay, this is how things are. This is the world we live in. So anyway, I get to the event. 3 days go by. It is a really great event. All these really cool things are happening. And you know how at the end of an event like that, again, like I'm in this high energy state. I'm really going, wow, this is great. I've met some new people. I'm feeling really energized. I've got all these new ideas to bring back home and apply to my work. I'm ready to go back and apply some of this stuff and get some things going. This is great. And I'm going back out to the airport, and I've got the same kind of energy. I'm going, this is cool. I wonder, you leave an event and you've been in this safe environment where you're being really friendly with everybody. Everybody's really open, and it kind of opens you up, and you're ready to be open and friendly to just about anyone. And as I'm walking down the aisle, heading for my aisle seat on the plane, thinking, well, I wonder if this person on the plane will have come from the event. And we can talk about it, and the whole flight will have this sort of extended version of the conference. And so I get to my seat, and guess what? It's the same woman. The same young woman is sitting there on the plane. Only this time she looks up, and our eyes meet. And the moment that our eyes meet, we both start laughing. Like, we both start laughing at the coincidence of meeting each other in the same way twice in a row. And we get talking. And I learn all these things about her. Like, I'm in my total gregarious mode from the conference, and she tells me, yeah, well, she's a student who goes to school in Northeastern in Boston, and she was down visiting her sister over the weekend in North Carolina, and she studies accounting. And I say, well, that's really cool because, you're never going to have to need looking for work because everybody needs an accountant. And I learned, we were able to have this conversation. And the question that I have here is, why did this happen? Why is it that the second time we met, we were able to talk when the first time we met, we weren't? And so I'm going to just back out of the story for a second. Like, that's the event that happened. And now I'm telling you the moral of the story. And the moral of the story, the universal lesson that I get here is that the second time that we met, we were able to speak. Like, she was able to look up and then feel comfortable enough to say hello to me and to get into this conversation, because I had become a familiar face. I had become familiar to her. Somehow the ice had been broken where I was no longer a total stranger. And in fact, in the context of our second meeting, among all the people on the plane, I was the only person among a whole plane full of strangers who was a familiar face. I was the only person that she would recognize from any time earlier in her life, which made her more open to be able to say hello. In fact, not only that, but the instant that we saw each other, we're both laughing together. So just to pause here for a second, that's the takeaway. Like, what does it take to break the ice and be familiar with practically anyone? This is a universal thing, right? It's universal. So take it one step further. What's the business lesson here? So my business lesson in this story is, okay, so here we are marketing our message. We're business people. We have a business and we want to reach out to people who, in fact, are total strangers. And what does it take for those total strangers to become familiar with us? And one of the things that I know to be true is that when you do video like this, and I'm telling you about the work that I do, when you make a video, and particularly when you make a live video, and you start showing up, like you show up on a Friday, and then 3 days later, you show up on a Sunday. And on that second time you show up, all of a sudden, you've become a familiar face. The person who saw you 3 days earlier is going, oh, I've seen this person. I've seen this person who comes on live and they're talking about this topic, and I've seen them before. And now you're familiar. And because you're familiar, they're more likely to tune in. They're more likely to listen to what you have to say. And so if you show up with any kind of regularity and you're live in the moment with a possibility of real-time exchange, you are now one friendly face in a sea of online strangers. And this is how you can break the ice with your audience. So this is just an example of a story that uses that same structure. Now, I made that story because I took from this event. Like, this event happened to me. This was a true thing. And one might think, well, that has nothing to do with anything. Like, so it's kind of interesting that you got on a plane, 3 days later you got on again, and you met the same person twice. But what's that got to be? But I connected it to two things. I connected it to a universal lesson about society at large around how do people interact? How is it that normally we ignore one another in a normal situation with strangers, and yet all of a sudden something will shift and we'll be able to connect, and we'll actually be able to become friends or at least acquaintances. And then I'd be able to take that one step further and connect it to the work I do. And this is the process that you want to go through. This is the process that you can choose to bring people on. And in my choosing of that story, I'm relating it to myself in the sense that I really do like to go to conferences. I really do like to go to big gatherings. And as I'm telling that story now, it's almost nostalgic. Like, I can remember a time in the past when this used to happen. And we're all kind of missing that ability to meet and gather in large groups. We're missing the ability to meet and gather and get together with other people in real time. And so this story conjures that feeling of nostalgia, that feeling of camaraderie when people all got together. So I'm conjuring and sharing that emotional content when I tell this particular story. So all these elements are there. I'm picking an emotion. I'm telling my story where there was the normal, and then there was the transformation, the change of going from stranger to familiar face. And then I'm telling the new normal, which is where we're sitting there talking away and we're like old buddies. And then I'm bringing that to like, okay, well, here's the takeaway, here's the moral, and then here's the business moral. And then if I was giving you a call to action, I would say, all right, now that I've told you this story, come to get on a call with me. If you want to learn how to do this, you want to do this really well, let's talk, and I can show you how to do this on a regular basis in your live videos. And just, get on a video chat with me, and we'll go there. And so those are the pieces of how you can put this all together. And let's see. So that's the end of the part of the story structure. That is basically the formula that you need. So next, and I'm just looking at my notes here. The thing that we do next is we're going to figure out how to find your stories. How can you go about collecting your stories? And one of the resources that I want to share is there's a really great storyteller by the name of Matthew Dix. And Matthew lives nearby to where I live. He lives down in Connecticut, and he's a really successful storyteller. And he has written a really terrific book called Storyworthy, which I highly recommend. The Storyworthy book is probably the best book on storytelling that I have ever read. And in this book, he gives this way of collecting stories, so that when you're thinking, when you're thinking that you don't have any stories, like I'm going, oh my gosh, I can't think of a single story to tell, or my life is really boring. I don't think very much happens to me, or I'm in the middle of quarantine and every day seems the same, and day after day after day, it's the same stuff. Nothing ever is going on. What in the world am I going to tell a story about? Well, if you use this technique, all you need is 5 minutes or less each day. It's a practice. This is a practice that you can put into place. Take 5 minutes each day, and basically you sit down at the end of the day and you ask yourself the question, what's the story of the day? What is the story that happened? And you really want to look for what thing happened, what triggering thing happened today that makes me think about some transformational moment that I can turn into a story. And from that thought, if something comes to you, whether it's something that actually did happen today, in the day that you're thinking of, or something that happened during the day that triggers a memory of something that happened to you earlier, or triggers a memory of something that happened with one of your clients, or triggers a memory of some book you read, or some movie that you saw, or some other thing out there in the world that you know about. And that can be the story that you create. And all you do is you just write down one line that says the story idea, so that you'll be able to remember it. That's it. That's all you do. Each day, sit down, spend up to 5 minutes. It could be less. You could spend less than 5 minutes doing this, but you sit down and you come up with, well, what happened today? What's the story of the day? Answer that question. And then from that transformative moment that is in your mind, write down the idea. That's it. And I'm going to share with you right here this video. Let's see, right here. So here's Matthew, and he is going to tell you a story, which is one example of his stories, and he's going to explain this method. So let me just go and turn this on so that you will get right from the horse's mouth here how this works.
I decided that every night before I went to bed, about 11:30, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to reflect upon my day, and I'm going to ask myself, if I had to tell a 5-minute story from something that happened today, as benign as it might be, what was the most story-like moment from my day? Now, I don't write the story down because that would be too much. All I do is write a snippet. I actually use Excel because I'm sort of an insane person. So this is my Excel spreadsheet from the most recent days. And you can see that what I write down is about a sentence or two. Sometimes it's just a collection of words, but they're things that mean something to me. And you can see that some days I have more than one item. And so I sat down and I just started doing that, not knowing what the results were going to be. This project turned into magic because I discovered that if you apply this to your life, if you sit down and honestly look for stories in your life, you begin to develop a lens, a storytelling lens that is sharp and clear. And you start to see that there are stories in your life all the time. There are moments when you connect with someone and your heart moves, or your position on something changes, or you discover something for the first time. And you also discover that there's beauty and import in your life that you never imagined was there. And so, like, if you look at my most recent one, which is the last one, from just a few days ago, it says, walked Kaylee at 2 a.m., underwear, birds, rain, and beauty. And so my dog woke me up at 2 o'clock in the morning, Kaylee. She doesn't do it very often, but she wakes me up. It's clear she has to pee. I'm wearing a pair of boxers, and I say, all right, I'll bring you onto the lawn, and I'll let you pee. And so I bring her out onto the lawn, and apparently she did not plan on just peeing because she started walking down the block. And again, I'm only in boxers, but I'm thinking, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. This can't go that bad. And so I walk with my dog in a pair of boxers around the block. And it's a busy block. And if you've ever been out at 2 o'clock in the morning, you'll know that the birds are louder at 2 o'clock in the morning than any other time. They sing their hearts out at 2 o'clock in the morning. And so I'm walking with my dog, and when I reach the furthest point on the block from my house, it begins to suddenly rain on me. And so I have a dog, and I have boxers, and I have the rain, and I'm far away from my house. And 5 years ago, I would have been angry about this moment. I would have seen nothing in this moment but annoyance. But I have that lens. I've developed it. And I stop on the block, and I realize my dog's 14 years old. She is my best friend. And I know that she's not going to be around for much longer. And this might be the last time in my life that I walk in the rain with this dog. And so what would have been annoying and forgotten is now something that I have written down and I will own for the rest of my life. I don't know what else happened on that day, but I look at that and I am right back on that sidewalk with the birds and the rain and my dog. And when I am lying on my deathbed at 100, I'll be able to get right back there. I don't lose a day because of it. It's magic. It's something that I never expected to happen. And then other amazing things happen because when you start to look for stories in your life and you refine that lens, you suddenly have all these stories well up from your childhood and your youth that you had forgotten. Because now I'm thinking about my dog in the rain, and suddenly you remember another moment with another dog when you were a 12-year-old boy. And suddenly that gets on my list too. And I start to have, the memories come rushing back so quickly, you have to brush them away. All of this happens because I sit down every night and ask myself, what's the 5-minute story from today? What makes today different than the last day? And then I write it down. Whether you use an Excel spreadsheet or whether you use a notebook, whatever you use, you write it down. And then suddenly you have more stories than you can imagine. I know hundreds of professional storytellers, and they think it's crazy how many stories I have. And I think it's crazy that they don't do what I tell them to do.
All right. And we're back. So, a couple things here. Number one, you heard that story about Matthew and his dog. Did you feel something? Did you feel the same emotion that he was sharing in that story? Did it trigger a memory of you and a dog that you used to have? Or a dog that you have now? Or maybe you're a cat person and it triggered a memory with you and your cat. You know, this is how stories work. And I feel like I hear this story and I'm taken along with him to that same emotional place. And I can connect with him and the story simply because he's a dog person and he's explaining his feelings about his dog. And I have those same feelings. I have the same feelings. And you can see that from this one idea, from this one story idea, there could be many others that are similar that just start coming into your brain. Like, oh my gosh, there was, this happened and this happened. Like in my life, I've had more than one dog. I've had several dogs, and there's stories that I could conjure from any one of those dogs as just one simple topic idea. So this is powerful. And the thing that I want to emphasize here is that if you do this practice, if you put this practice, into place each day, just, whatever you have in the evening, just spend a little bit of time, put it in your calendar. Like, okay, before, between washing the dishes after dinner and doing the next thing, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to come up with the story idea of the day. If you do that, one thing that will happen is that you will not only collect stories, but you'll start realizing that your life is super rich. Like you've had all these things happen in your life. And imagine doing this once a day for even 2 months, 60 days where you have 60 different story ideas. Of course, if you come up with one, you end up maybe coming up with 2 or 3. So you end up with many story ideas, but also you're coming up with literal memories of parts of your life. And you're realizing, oh, I've actually led this really rich, really amazing existence. And I have all these people around me that I'm now remembering that I forgot about. And just like what Matthew was sharing there, that incident with his dog, he's going to remember that. Just like your stories are connect with people and they're going to remember you for your stories, you're going to remember yourself for your stories. You're going to remember all these things so much better about your life as time goes on. So this is something that you can train yourself. You can train yourself to do. And I promise if you do this, 2 things will happen. Well, 3 things will happen. One is you're just going to have a better appreciation for your own life and your own well-being and your own value. Like you're going to be feeling like, I lead this amazing life. That's going to happen. And if that's all that happened, that would be great. Number 2, you're going to be able to create a story using the formula that I've shared with you today that will be a powerful way to communicate your message. And number 3 is that you will, in fact, communicate your message in a way that is powerful marketing and will move the people who you want to serve. The people who most need you will be moved to a place where they are ready to be served by you. They will be moved to a place where they are ready to be served by you. And this is the most powerful part. So this is, wrap a big bow around all of this. When you are putting this together, like you're going, okay, great. You want to come up with, all right, what kind of story do I want to tell? And I'm going to give you just 3 examples. I don't want to take this too further or going too deep into wiring here, but there are 3 basic story types that you want to have in mind as it fits with what kind of marketing do I want to do? Type number 1 is what I would call myth busting. This is the way I refer to it. And basically what you're doing with myth busting is you are challenging the status quo. You're going out into the world and you're looking for the way things are, and you're basically saying, nope, I want to challenge that. I want to challenge the way things are, and I want to show that there's a better way. There's a new way, there's a new direction. And of course, you want to lead the way and show that the new way is your way. And so you want to tell a myth-busting story. That's story type number 1. Story type number 2, and I'll just go say that the myth-busting story is really good as a way to become familiar in the sense that if you're telling a myth-busting story, because it's challenging people's perceptions, it's challenging their beliefs, and it's often challenging limiting beliefs, the outcome is that people will feel empowered by your story. They will feel like the limit that they had to their belief has been lifted, and now they feel empowered, and that makes you very attractive. So it gets people's attention because you're going, wait a minute, I'm not sure I agree with this. And that makes them go, I need to pay attention because this sounds like it's challenging to me. So they pay attention. So it's a really good attention-getting, attracting type of thing to do. The second type of story is that you want to tell connection stories. Stories that are relatable, that will make people connect with you. And these are the more personal stories. These are the stories that you might tell that have to do with your dog or that have to do with the time you went to a conference, things like that. So connection stories, stories where people see you, who you are, and the kind of person you are, and the kind of thing that you do, and they can connect because they're going, oh, they do this, I'm a person like this. So we're people who do things like this, and that's a way for them to connect with you. And the third type of story that also is really strong and powerful is a story that handles their objections. because one of the biggest things that is keeping people from working with you isn't you. It's not your price. It's not what you're up to. It's not, any of those things. It's that they don't believe that they can do it. They have these objections that are keeping them, and they're their objections that are keeping them from saying, okay, I'm ready to do this. I'm actually going to do it now. They have a lot of objections. And so you can tell stories that handle those objections. And the best type of story to tell that handles objections is a client story. You want to tell a story about somebody who was just like them, who then went through this explosion and transformation and ended up in a new normal and had a really good result. A really good result, which is what the person who you're talking to wants. And if it's a client story, you're showing how you worked with this person to help them as the guide along the way. This could be a story about yourself. You could be telling your own story about how you went through the same kind of transformation, how you used to be in this one place and you went through a transformation and you got to a new place. Either way is good, but often the client stories are very, very powerful, and they're good stories to tell. And if you do it in this new formula where you pick an emotion you want and you tell the story in this normal explosion, new normal way, and then you give the takeaway, what's the moral? And then that's universal that everybody can learn. And then you bring it to, okay, and here's the business moral. Here's the connecting the dots between this big lesson and here's the way that I use it in my work. And here's how it can apply to you in your work. And then you give them a call to action. You tell them what to do next. You've done all this stuff. They're feeling the emotion that you want them to feel, and you tell them what to do next. So there you are, myth busting and connection, and what's the third one? Your client stories, where basically you are helping people get over this problem that they want to solve. So you're handling their objections. So there you go, those three. And I'm just checking the time here. We are now 52 minutes into the hour. So I think we're pretty close to the end. I'm just going to look at my notes here and make sure I'm not forgetting anything that I wrote down that I want you guys to know about. And yeah, we're good. So as I sign off here, I'm just going to throw it out that this method of storytelling is probably one of the easiest ways that you can become a very, very effective marketer. It is, it's probably the most efficient, simple way to communicate your message that will actually lead people to your door, that will lead people to the promised land. And if you combine this method, this storytelling model, with video, especially with live video, if you combine this method with live video, and you're doing this kind of storytelling as the way that you are communicating your message to the world, this is, in this moment of time, probably the most powerful thing that you can be doing to market your business, to actually get people to a place where they're saying, I'm ready, I want this, I'm sold. And the truth is, that's where they will be. They'll be in a place where we're going, okay, I'm sold, I get it, I got it, I'm sold. Where can I sign up? What do I do now? Tell me where to go. And if you're thinking, I want more, like if you're literally, I'm going to say this right to you right now, like if you want more, go ahead and say so in the chat. Contact me, send me a DM, go to my website, awesomevideomakers.com, schedule a call with me. I'd be happy to talk with you more, to answer questions that you have about using this method, to give you more ideas, like we could do a little brainstorming together about story ideas that you could put into effect, and also to just go deeper around how do you, what's the system that you put into place so that you are doing this on a regular basis? What's the strategy that you put into place so that you are actually creating the series of stories that would be really good for you to tell for your business. And the thing is that you don't have to keep telling endless stories. You can pick a stories series that you bring to new audiences. Tell the same stories to new audiences. And once you have stories sort of under your belt, they say, okay, this is a really good story that is about myth busting. And here's another good story that is about my personal connection. And then here's another really great story that's about how to overcome objections of the people who are wanting to work with me. That set. Bring that set to a new group, put them in place, 1, 2, 3, kind of like a video series, a video funnel. Can go out during, get somebody on your email list and they're getting video number 1, video number 2, video number 3 in an automated sequence. Imagine that. And that brings people along so that by the time they've gone through this series, they're basically in this place. They're primed and ready to say, okay, I'm ready to work with you. This looks really good to me. This is something that I really want. I am now moved to take action for myself. I now believe in myself enough to do this. And this is the kind of thing that you can do. And so anyway, if you want to know more about how do I put this all together? How do I do this? Let me know. My calendar is open. It's right at the end of the month. So this is a really good time to get in because usually at the beginning of the month, I have more spaces in my calendar. So you can send me a DM. Be happy to set up like a 30-minute video chat and bring you on board. And we can do this all together. And the last thing I'm going to share, just as a fun little thing, I am launching a new video series that is a video podcast. And I'd just like to get input here. And even if you're watching the replay, go ahead and leave your comments in the replay. I'd really love to hear your comments on this. So I'm using this tool called StreamYard at the moment. I don't know if this is the one I'm going to keep using, but it's the one I'm using right now. And in this tool, I can do all these really cool things. So for instance, I can put on my show logo up here. And my show is called The Live Stream Show. This is the new series that I'm putting together. And you want to think like, it's a little bit like America's Got Talent, where I'm going to have a panel. There's going to be me and a couple of, a co-host. The two of us will be the panel. And then we're going to reach out to all of you guys and say, hey, we would like you to submit something that you did. It could be a story. We'd say, okay, go tell your best myth-busting story, or go tell your best personal connection story, or go tell your best, I'm going to handle objections story. Go do that. And then submit your video, and it has to be short. We'll give you a time limit. Can't be more than, say, 2 minutes. And submit that video. And then in the future episode, one of these weekly series, we will bring your video on, and we'll bring you on as a guest. And so we'll have a series of guests. We'll show your video, and then we'll talk about it. And we'll give it like, here, this is really cool. And we'll talk to you about what was your creative process, and what were you thinking when you did it, and what was your experience of doing this, and how did you collect this story, and all that kind of thing, so that you can share your process and your experience and learn from that in this dialogue that you have between me and my co-hosts, and who will be other expert storytellers, expert filmmakers, expert speaking coaches, people like that you will have access to and be able to interact with in real time. And then, of course, the whole idea is that all of us, all the people who are watching this series, are going to learn from each other, and we're going to be able to see how this process can keep expanding and growing and getting better. And so I've been fooling around with, the setup here. And in this tool, I can create a really interesting environment where I can create a frame. So look. Now I'm in the frame of the live stream show. And so here's one that's got this sort of gray frame around it. And I've done a couple of things. Here's one that is blue and purple. And you can tell me, which one do you like better? Do you like the gray, which is a little bit plain, but matches the wall in the background? Or do you like blue and purple? And see, this is a little more three-dimensional. It's a little more show-like. And I did another one that's lighter. This is a lighter one, which this one I kind of like because when I add comments, like Phyllis, who chimed in earlier, like this was yesterday, she said she couldn't make it. So she said, I'll see you in the replay. So you can see how this all matches. And then during the show, when people are commenting, I can bring in their stuff. And then, of course, I can also bring in the banners that I have. So when I'm talking about like, what's our show today, we're talking about, this is the Tell Stories That Sell Masterclass, and this all matches, the colors all match. So love to hear your opinion on this dressing. And I am excited about doing this. I've just been learning how to do this myself. If you're interested in doing this yourself and you're going, well, how did you do that? Like, how did you create those graphics? What did you do? It's not hard. And I could teach a tutorial on how to do that. And, or you can get into my masterclass where this is the kind of thing that I teach. I actually have an ongoing course right now where I'm showing people how to do what is basically video podcasting. So video marketing as a podcast and sort of learning all the lessons from podcasting and then applying it to the live video world and combining those two things together and making something that's super cool. So there you have it. That's my, that's the workshop. So thanks so much. Whoops, wait, I take this off and take this off. And let's see, go back over here, go here, and I can turn off this one, there. Now we're back in the plain world. So that's what I have for you today. I'm going to speak to the people in the replay. This video is going to stay right here. This is on YouTube as an unlisted video. And what I will do in the future is I'm going to take this video and I'm going to embed it onto my website, onto a non-public page. And it will be there as a permanent, ongoing, evergreen training. And you'll be able to catch it and see the replays there. And once I do that, once I upgrade it into that new version, I will send you the links so that you will have this for the foreseeable future. So you can come back and you can take a look at this in the future. And what I will do, actually, when I make it into the new version, I'm actually, this was delivered in 4 parts. So I'm going to edit it down so that it's in 4 separate components. So if all you want to do is watch just the 4-part formula that I shared, you can just go, that'll be like video number 3, and you can just watch that one part, which will be a short version. And that way it'll be much easier to then, rather than having to sit through the entire hour workshop. So I hope all of this is helpful, and yeah, reach out to me. Let's get on a video chat. I would love to hear how you were thinking of applying this in your own work. Be happy to talk and help you brainstorm and get more ideas. Send me a direct message, leave a comment, do whatever you want to do. You all have my email because I've been emailing you. You can just reply on any of those emails and just say, hey, Brad, I want to do a chat. And we'll set that up. All right. So thanks so much for joining, and I will see you next time around.